Hello everybody, 6-Speed Dakota here, and today's project is I'm going to go over the theory on how to change your spark plugs on most newer Dodge V6s and V8s. I've had somebody request that I do spark plugs on a Hemi, and fortunately I don't have a Hemi, or really don't know anybody that does, that would let me work on their vehicle. Or no, you know, not like need it done per se. I didn't mean that in a bad way. But this is a 4.7 liter Magnum. Then the 3.7 liter in the Rams, the Dakotas, anything that comes with this style of modular engine has, at least from 2001, I believe, when the 4.7 liter first came out, to 2007, when this style of engine kind of ended, you have plugs. You have these little coil packs, these little black things, and they each have a little plug in them. Obviously there's 8 for this one, and then there's 4 more on that side. And, oh, come on, focus. 1 right there, and 1 right down there. They can be tricky to get to, so you may have to remove these heater hose lines and your intake, depending on how hard it is. For a Hemi, or any kind of Hemi engine, it's going to be in the valve cover, right at the top of the valve cover here. You should see them. It's fairly obvious, actually, when you see them. And most of these will have a single 10mm bolt or nut right there. The Hemis, I believe, either have 1 or 2 that holds a coil pack on. You pull those out. You unplug the coil pack, which is simply just a simple connector like this. If I can get it undone. And you pull the whole coil pack off. Now with a Hemi, though, is you have 16 spark plugs. You have 2 per every cylinder, so you have to make sure that you replace both. You can't just replace one. The tools you're going to need a 3/8 drive ratchet, a short extension, a 10mm socket, and a spark plug socket. Also, some anti-seize, your respective number of spark plugs that you need, and I use some silicone brake lubricant. But you could also use dielectric grease or any kind of silicone paste. Just don't go too hog wild with anything silicone, because if it gets in your intake, it'll ruin your O2 sensors. So the first thing we're going to do is we got to remember that you always change the spark plugs cold, because what happens is when you take the plug out, the hole in the head, as the head cools, it'll actually force the thing to elongate slightly, making it harder to install the plug. And you could actually crack your cylinder head. So do this with the heads cold or lukewarm. So first thing you're going to do is squeeze the tab wherever it is on this thing. I'm right-handed, so I need to use my right hand. And that connector just pulls out. Now take your 10mm, put it on that guy, and loosen it off. Do not use impact tools on these. These coils, very expensive and very, very sensitive, easy to damage. So, no impact tools. Do not use impact tools to remove spark plugs, or you will end up stripping the head, especially because this head on this motor is aluminum. So, here's your ignition coil. It's quite long. And down here is a little seal. I also recommend putting a little bit of silicone grease on there too. Just prevent this seal prevents any dirt and crud from getting down in there. So, set this guy aside. Now we're going to change over from our 10mm socket over to our spark plug socket. Now, spark plug socket is special because it actually has a little rubber cushion up top to cushion the insulator. Now, unfortunately, that extension isn't long enough, so I'll be right back. Okay, now, quick interlude here. If you got a little washer here on your spark plug, if this is a new one, which your washer's gonna be a little thicker, stupid bee, you're gonna want to give the spark plug an extra 2/3 of a turn. If it's got a taper seal, if you don't have this little thing here, all you want to do is give it a 1/16 of a turn, just a little snug. So make sure you do not over-tighten that. Now see here, there's a bit of a wobble here. Now that's kind of, you don't want to break the insulator off inside there or do anything bad. So hold it with one hand to support it. man, that thing's tight in there. Now if you break it, well, that's a whole different story. You're going to have to watch somebody else's video on how to put a helicoil in, because I've never done it and I hopefully never will. Strip it in here, but it's a common problem for the 4.6 and the 5.4 and the 6.8 liter Fords to have a spark plug actually blow out of there. So as you can see, this is a platinum tipped plug. Very, very clean. I've had these things in there for almost 2 years, and there's not a single hint of wear on this thing. So you can see right there. Looks like it may be running a touch lean, judging by the insulator, but if you look at the tip of the side here, it's quite dark, so I think I'm okay. Now, if you look at the tip, if that tip is worn down at all, then you're going to want to replace your spark plug. So, but if you got a regular copper electrode, which I'll go grab. Okay, so as you can see here, the tip there is nice, fine pointed, and it's not really all that worn. You can see it's still nice and shiny. Come on, focus. Now, if the tip is worn, or if you have a copper plug which has more of a blunt tip on it rather than a point, and you see that that tip is actually kind of curved, it's time to replace your spark plugs. All these vehicles come with copper tip plugs. I highly recommend putting a platinum in it because they last for a lot longer. I've had this for double the life of a copper plug and it looks perfectly fine. You don't need to go to iridium unless it comes with it because they are quite expensive plugs. So, next thing we're going to do is take some anti-seize. Anti-seize is very important. It prevents the spark plug from seizing in its hole. Especially with aluminum heads, you absolutely need anti-seize for an aluminum headed motor like this. Or else you could end up basically seizing the threads in there, and when you go to take the thing out, it'll just strip it right out, and that's going to be a very expensive repair. That might be a little bit generous, but there we go. So just make sure it's got a good coating. It'll spread itself out once it's in there. Then take this. We're just going to pretend that this is a new spark plug. Okay. Now, if you really worried, you can gap the spark plug, but most of them come pre-gapped, and I really wouldn't worry about it too much. It's just kind of a waste of time to just gap every single one. We're going to put it down in there. Now, what you want to do is you want to be very careful. You want to feel this thing to make sure it's not being cross-threaded. Because once again, with an aluminum head, aluminum is soft and you will rip the threads out. So if it feels like it's turning very smoothly like this, then you're A-OK. Now that we got it in there, we're going to tighten down the plug. So once the plug bottoms out by hand, and you'll feel it bottom out, you don't need to reef it on there with your fingers. So once you feel the plug bottom out, take your wrench, set it for tighten. Now you're going to set it up like a clock. So with the wrench at the very top, you're going to want to give it an extra 2/3 of a turn. And you'll actually feel that washer crush inside there. And then just give it a little tight snug. You don't want to reef that thing on in there. Now if this is a taper seal plug, all you have to do is just give it a little 1/16 of a turn and make sure it's snug. Snug is the key. Do not kill this thing in there, or you will never get it out and you'll end up stripping the head, which is a very expensive job to fix. So if you're trying to save yourself money, you basically just ruined it. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our dielectric silicone grease, take a little bit, see that little bit on the end of my finger there. We're going to put just a bit in the opening of the coil like that. This will allow the coil to come out of the spark plug nicely. And you especially want to do this if you have spark plug wires, because you could actually end up tearing the terminal out, which I've done before. Spark plug wires. Also, this little rubber seal here that prevents crud from getting in there. Put a little bit on that too. It just kind of helps everything come back apart when it's time to change the plugs next. So, set that guy down in there. like that. Then we're going to take our, take our shorty extension here. I know you can't see it, I'm trying to grab it on this little ledge here. Take our shorty extension. Now you don't really need to put anti-seize on this nut. It's not really imperative, because you don't want to tighten that thing on there too much, and it's not really exposed to too many of the elements, so you don't really have to worry so much. This is just to basically hold this coil pack and prevent it from vibrating, so you really don't have to tighten this thing like it's going to hold the engine together or nothing like that. All you have to do is just one hand, just a little, and that's it, that's all. So once your bolts are back in, do not forget to plug in your connector or you might end up with a mess. And that's how you change the plugs, just repeat for the other 8. Or if you have a Hemi, you can repeat it for all 16. Now the newer model Dakotas from 2008, I believe, on to 2011 when the production ended, they actually have 2 plugs per cylinder too. I'm not quite sure what they look like, I haven't seen one up close, but it's the same kind of principle. So you can try gap your spark plugs if you really, really want, but you don't have to. Really, unless you're really worried about it. Because gapping tools and feeler gauges can be quite expensive. Or at least the feeler gauges can be. Gapping tools are quite cheap, you can buy them at your local auto parts store. But remember, if you have a Hemi or a newer 4.7 like this, you have 16 plugs you have to change. Also, remember, anti-seize is very, very important. The silicone grease like this, it's not really super important if you have a coil on plug, because usually the coil doesn't sit as tightly on the thing like a spark plug wire. A spark plug wire has to stay on there by friction, so the boot has to be tight, which can lock it in there. With these stupid things here, actually they're not stupid, they're actually quite nice. They don't have, like, they're held in by that one little nut, so they don't have to constrict around the plug as tight. So you can do that if you want. I prefer to do it, but you don't have to. But anti-seize is the #1 most important thing. Alright, thank you for watching. I'm glad I could fulfill your request for you. Any other requests, I can only do what really comes in here, but I'll try my best to do it for you. Alright, thanks for watching. Take it easy, everybody.